I'm the head of financial accounts over at Serona Care and Health. Been there for 7 years, so the organisation also went through my diagnosis with me. I will share my presentation bit. Get started. So I've done the beginning part. So I'm an insanely stubborn human, and unfortunately, I ignored a lot of the signs for having a problem. Um, I do know a few people that have done similar stuff. So my first episode with my MS was 2018. Um, I sort of lost speech while on holiday and started slurring as if I was very drunk without the alcohol. And then on our return flight, I lost feeling on the left-hand side of my body. Just pushed it off to stress. Didn't really think much of it. Then probably 6 months later, I blacked out and fell backwards into a bookcase, taking out about two shelves with me on the way. Again, I ignored that one, thinking, I'll be fine, it's just a funny. So went about life. We went into COVID, the stress and the NHS picked up and up and up. Sorry, it won't be what's on my slides because I'll end up going off on a tangent. So the slides are a better story about what really happened rather than me doing it this way. But November 2020, coming up to Christmas, doing probably too many hours, doing too many things. I blacked out. I went straight down and landed on my face. My wife's epileptic, so we're used to neurological issues, and she's always very careful about anything that involves the head. So I was sent off to the GPs because I didn't want an ambulance coming at the time. The next day, went off to the GP and saw them, and I was picked up by a really good GP who wanted to look deeper into it because although it could have been just a one-off episode, because I'd had other funnies in the past, she wanted to look further into it. So she got the bit between the teeth and started sending me off. So they started sending me off on different tests because I was very tacky, and I am whenever I'm going into medical situations. So I had ridiculously high heart rate of 140 odd. So they thought, is it something to do with the heart? So echocardiogram, 72 hours with a heart monitor, went through all the cardiology stuff, clear. Then went in to see if I had Addison's disease and a few other genetic stuff. There's an illness called myasthenia gravis in my family, which was also looked into. So I had the test for that. Again, another neurological, all clear, nothing. So from November through to about April, May time, they were doing lots and lots of weird tests and nothing was coming up and constantly doing stuff. It's a lot of waiting. It's a lot of stress while you're doing it. It's a bit random. So they passed me off to neurology finally, which is, as I understand it in the UK, always the last point. So eventually got into neurology sort of 6-9 months ago. And then with my first meeting with my neurologist, who at the time was fairly new to Bristol, he does a lot of MS research and a lot of other stuff. And he always comments whenever he meets me that he'll never forget my first meeting because a lot of my tests were very bizarre. I've put on here, I'm doing this all a bit quick, so I'll try and slow up a bit. I have very few tells, like a lot of people with MS. You can't necessarily see it. So at that point, I had a really bad twitch in my index finger on my left hand, as well as lots of spasms in my left, because all my issues are down my left-hand side. Tends to happen with people, apparently. They pick one side or the other. So there was question marks. Well, it could be Parkinson's disease at early onset. What it could be. Strength tests, I still pass those with flying colours. I am nowhere near as strong as I was growing up and in my early years, but I'm stronger than normal people, and I am far stronger than I should be through to having my MS. So I failed the strength tests every time, and I had one again in February. Beginning of March with my last MS checkup, and passed that one with flying colours again. So that one never shows that I've got an issue or any form of weakness in my top half. So I passed all of those, but my balance was shocking back then, and a few other little weird niggles. So he was doing his thinking out loud, going lots of different things, and then he said, It's definitely not MND because it's the ankles that go first. And the first thing you think is, wow, that is a massive relief because motor neuron is really not a nice illness. And I've recently come across people that have been diagnosed with. And I guess when you're going through this period of unknown, it's so many different things run through your brain as to what could be wrong with you. So when you know things that are really unpleasant that have been knocked off, not I'm saying MS is good, but it's at the time it was sort of one of the better options. So from day one, as a neurologist, Dr. Cosper has been fantastic here at Southmead. Brilliant bloke. He's as mad as a hatter. He's crackers, but he fits me because I'm slightly bonkers anyway. So it's really quite good. So we hit it off and get on really well now. So he then went through a few things, different stuff, sent me off for a load more bloods, which, as I understand now, all the blood tests are to discount other things, and sent me in for my first MRI, which, as I put into this one, it was time to see if I've got a brain. See what's in there, what's going on, and what's happening. And I will joke a lot around the illness. My coping mechanism is finding the funny side of silly things. So for me, I often think I walk like Captain Jack Sparrow if I'm having a bad day. So when my balance has gone completely, it's like a drunk person's wandering along, or Captain Jack's weird walk as he does with these funny hands. Or you can wake up in the morning with what appears to be a hangover when you've had no alcohol whatsoever. It's the most random thing, and it's kind of like playing Russian roulette with your body every single day. When you wake up the next day, you have no idea what's going to happen. Bits could be dead, pins and needles, balance is completely shot, vertigo is great fun when everything's spinning, migraines, all sorts of stuff. So he set it off. Make sure what was going on inside the body. So off I went to have this MRI. Did head and spine. You wanted to make sure he covered every option. So just to make sure to see what was really going on, because he was completely foxed at the start. The MRI came back with interesting results. I had a block in the cervical area of my spine where two discs had collapsed completely and were blocking the spinal fluid from flowing. So that was problem one. And the other part was it showed up about 4 or 5 lesions within my brain, some of which when we first looked through him, because he sits down, he goes through everything, and it's really quite detailed and quite helpful and a nice walk through everything, because his delivery is very good and something that's quite hard. He felt that some of them were old, which kind of tied back to those silly moments where I was being too stubborn and not paying attention to what was going on with my body, where those funny bits where I was getting slurred speech or losing feeling or blacking out. Some of my lesions were older, so they'd been around for a while. One of my more recent MRIs, the comment random was one of them was simmering, which means it's still active and it's going on the edges like a little burning ember. When you burn a bit of paper, kind of like it burns out slightly, so they still go. So a couple were new and a couple were old. But at that point, he didn't want to give a diagnosis because of the problem I had with my spine. He needed, you kind of learn and put things together and learn more as you go through it. So you learn afterwards what's going on. So you live in this world of complete confusion, which again adds to the stress. It amplifies all the symptoms you're going through, dipping them up in minor injuries a few times and all sorts. But for him, he needed to try and get neurosurgery to agree to operate on my spine to clear the blockage, which was going on with the collapsed discs, before he could do anything else, with the hope that it would help some of the stuff on my left-hand side, because it was actually blocking that side, the nerve node, worst on the nerve, so it's coming through. So they eventually agreed to do the I can never say it, to take the disc out and put the spacers in in February 2022. And as soon as that was agreed, I got my MS diagnosis the next day for what was initially relapse remitting. And I'll cover a bit about those. And I have put a video, so no, everybody has to suffer me speaking all the time. So there's a couple of little videos in as well. So it's broken up a little bit. So it went from being, we think this is this, what's what everybody thinks it is, to all of a sudden going, yes, you're going to have surgery on your neck. You've also got these lesions in your brain, and we're classifying as multiple sclerosis. So it went from very little information to everything all at one hit. And then, unfortunately, a couple of weeks later, because they weren't sure how quick they could do the surgery had to come first before anything else. But a couple of weeks after that, I was in a road traffic accident where I was hit from behind, which, although an MRI showed very minimal change in the spine, they decided to bring the surgery forward, and I had it at the end of March 2022. So they did that. That all went really well. It was very successful. Great neurosurgeon and his registrar, who were fab. In that hospital within a couple of days, with a neck brace on, the collar, so you kind of stuck with it for a while. And then it was a case of getting better from that, 6 weeks or so, and then back into neurology for the idea of what to do. As we went through the early parts of my diagnosis with Dr. Cosburn, he started to piece together the bits, because with MS, for choosing which variant it is, it's a lot of it's down to monitoring and seeing what happens with your body. And because even though I do get blips with it, normally when I've got an illness or something else where it makes it worse or high stress, I don't have relapses. So as I like to do everything, the most complicated, hardest route, I was reclassified as primary progressive, which is 10% of people with MS. So we moved across to that version. That one also means you only have one medication choice. Whereas relapse remitting has quite a few. Secondary has some because it comes off the back of the relapse remitting. Only one choice with primary progressive. It's Ocrevus in the UK, although new drugs are starting to come through. So I was kind of lucky with that. So I went onto that, and that started, I think the first batch might have been the February afterwards, because before he did all that, I then had to go for a spinal tap. At this point, I'm not a fan of needles. So my world now, where I have to have lots of blood tests or have infusions and all the other stuff, is great. But the one thing I was really glad at that point I had missed was the spinal tap, because normally it has to have the markers from the spinal fluid along with the MRI. And there was enough information on my MRI, but just to make sure everything was covered, I had to go for the spinal tap. And weirdly, it was actually the anesthetic which was worse than the big needle, which is good, because when they put the anesthetic in both sides of the spine, when they did that, I jumped a mile. So I'm so glad that by the time they got to the needle, it was completely numb, because if I jumped, that could have been catastrophic. But yeah. But yeah, as I've put into this, there's so many tests, it takes so long. And for me, diagnosis was about 14 months before I actually had it in writing as to what's really going on with life, and having a reason and an understanding of where it is. When it first happens, it's a huge relief. You finally know you're not going crazy. That's big. It's really quite nice. You can kind of settle down, and then reality hits after it. The fact that this illness is ever going anywhere. The reality of it is it is going to get worse. I'm someone that likes to try and understand stuff. I have a background in audit as well as finance, so I do a lot of research and go to look. And I was told early on that so much of the stuff I find on the internet is negative. And that's so true. There is a huge amount of negative stuff out there. So I tried to work really hard to find positive stuff, and came across Michael J. Fox's books. And although I know it's Parkinson's rather than MS, his life, his journey, and everything else involved in is really quite intriguing. He was so young when it happened to him. He was about 24, I think, when he was first diagnosed with Parkinson's. And the way the media sort of take it, and if you, I didn't put Selma Blair on here, and she talks about her early years with her MS, where everybody thought she was drunk or on drugs or everything because of the way she was in public. And there was lots of stuff with Fox in the early years, and then he's kind of followed his whole path right through to where he is now across 3 books. And he's an extremely positive person, always looking for the bright side of everything. Again, seeing the comical side around things that happen where we fall over thin air, or the silly stuff, the funny things that you can laugh at rather than getting upset about. And that sort of positive approach really helped me. Um, and I recommend those books to anybody to read, regardless of background or illness, or whatever. They're really good. The first and the third book are fantastic. The middle one is more about his career as an actor, which is less about the Parkinson's. But the first and last one are just brilliant. And if you watch Glastonbury last year, he was up on stage still playing the guitar. He's still going. He's still pushing his boundaries and really doing it. And then the second positive thing I found totally by random, because there's so little out there that's positive, and a lot of people disappear from public eye when they're diagnosed. So Jack Osborne has MS, Ozzy Osbourne's son. He's talked a lot in the early years, but he's stepped back now. Um, oh, Montel Jordan, who used to run a talk show in the 90s in the US, since his MS diagnosis, he's disappeared completely from TV. He's pulled back. And there's a few other people. Someone was saying to me, it was a singer, Christina Aguilera apparently has been diagnosed recently, and she's taken a step back from from the limelight. They've all pulled back. So apart from Selma Blair, no one's really put themselves out to show what it's like to live with the reality of it. So finding positive stuff around those early days was really difficult, and it still is now. But I came across, looking for films, I came across the only movie I could find, which is in Spanish, and it's on Netflix. And I've got a clip of a trailer on here, and it's a film called 100 Meters, and it follows a guy called Ramon, who, when he was first diagnosed, was told he would never walk more than 100 meters. And after going through the horrible periods at the start where you realize you're losing so much of your life and a lot of your fitness and other things, he got himself on a path to set himself up to do his first Ironman, and it follows his progress through getting to that first Ironman, which includes a bad relapse before his first race. So he had to go back to scratch, start all over again with his training and do it. And it follows it through, and it talks around a lot of how it happens, what the different parts, what affects your life, family, relationships. Look at the vertigo, what it's like living with a vertigo. That seems quite funny with his stepdad. I like that bit, and other parts of it. And it's a hard film to watch in parts, but it just shows that it's not over. It gives you that hope that you can still do stuff. And for me, it hit a chord. I'm someone who's always cycled in the past. Since my MS, I haven't got on a bike. I don't trust my balance on a bike. I cycled, ran, and walked. I was doing up to 100 mile a week. So for me, to go to the point where I lost so much mobility and core strength was really kind of weird. So he's actually been quite a big positive for me within coming across his story and learning. And I've read a lot about him online and all the stuff he's gone to do. He actually did 12 Ironmen or 12 years worth of doing Ironmen, multiple Olympic length. And it's just astonishing. I mean, the end of the movie actually has the actual footage of him coming across the line with his family, which is really kind of nice. So I put a quote from him, and it's the last part on the quote there where he says, "I'm respectful for those disabled by MS, but if just one person, more sclerosis, takes up any kind of exercise after hearing my story, I'll be the happiest man on earth." That, for him going off to do that, I think, in sharing his story is just great. I mean, they're his words there with this, and this should hopefully work as being his, which it hasn't. My embedded video doesn't work. Now I've put it onto the big thing. I'll try and get that up on YouTube in a minute while I talk, and we can share that. Let me see if I can bring it up that way. But yeah, the story. It's really weird, and it's quite poignant for me as well, because the beginning of the film, how he started off with collapses, and it's for him the way he goes down. He was in an office situation when it happened, and but it's very similar to how I think mine probably looked at the time, and it was it's just one of those moments where you just go, okay, I can actually associate with this person. There's someone else that's got a similar sort of starting point to mine. But yeah, let's see if I can move this across to this side, and it will. No, come on. Right, get this. Go back to the beginner, and hopefully this will play. Please, someone let me know if they can hear it.
Can't seem to hear it, no. But there are subtitles.
No. It is in Spanish, so it's probably better with the subtitles anyway. Get rid of that now. Hopefully I won't need. Hopefully my other embedded video. Right, noise suppression on the back. Sorry, YouTube's adverts. And for anybody that the kind of story behind it is that him and his father-in-law don't actually get on. They didn't, but his father-in-law was a professional cyclist, which he didn't know about, and they turn out to be a very good trainer and athlete combination, and it's quite interesting seeing the evolution, the problems he goes through, ending up in rehab, ending up back into the hydro pool, not being able to walk properly on the beams to relearn to walk after the bad relapse he had before the first race, and following that journey, because I mean the trailer shows a lot more of the happier sides of it, but it does cover all areas of it, and it's really quite an interesting film. I've never found it in English. There was also a book written as well, which I've not managed to find, which is a shame because I'd like to sit and read the book, or listen to it on Audible because my attention span's too short. Because I have the conflict of MS, which kills you with fatigue, and ADHD, which means I go for everything like a complete crazy human. So yeah, me reading, it's not so much, but I do a lot of Audible, and I listen to a lot of books to take them in on multiple times, and certain things that I have found which help mentally with it as an illness. But armed with Ramon's story and learning about there's bits in Runner's World, there's quite a lot around on the internet, articles, and talking to him about his multiple Ironman, all the stuff he did, and living in a family with, oh, this thing gonna, so what? Yes. So, oh, go back. Sorry, my slideshow just went wrong. Sharing. I need to open the other one up. That's not the one. Sorry. Let me just fix it. Something had to go wrong, didn't it? One on this side. Just trying to work out how to go backwards. Shoot taskbar? No. And slideshow. I'm going to restart it. Right side. So before everybody joined, I was talking about my life as a father. I've got two daughters, both of which are competitive cheerleaders. They've been cheerleading for 10 years. My oldest has just come back from the US. Well, we've also come back. She was out at the World Championships. She was out there last year at the summit, which is the level just below for Worlds, and won that with the first Welsh team ever to win out at summit. So she's a real inspiration for me on someone as an athlete. And I grew up in a sports family anyway, never been particularly good at anything. The club they started at, Phoenix, have England's advanced adaptive ability, which is a mix of those with and without disabilities combined. So my youngest daughter was back there cheering for them. I got involved and started adaptive cheerleading last year. I'm now in my second season with Smoke. I am there in the back in my nice sparkly outfit. I wear it to perform. It comes off afterwards. It's a bit too purple for me, but it's great. I've built up so much core strength. There's a whole range of different issues, medical issues within the team. We've got seated athletes, we've got all sorts, those with different problems here in sight. And it's been quite an amazing group to be around for inspiration and support and help. So, and I put onto this slide about the fact that, I used to be so active up until then. And I lost so much from a fitness point of view due to the MS at the start, because I didn't know how to handle the fatigue side of it. I got very, very frustrated at not being able to do the things I could. The fact that I don't always have the dexterity that I want to. So I got involved last year at level 1. We've now gone up to a level 2 in adaptive abilities. I've recently joined a team in London who are a level 4 non-tumble, so there's no tumbling. It's just literally the throwing people in the air, catching and stunting with a bit of dance. So I'm now competing for 2 teams. I've got, last year I started joining courses that are run by Paracheer International. So they are the people who wrote rules around adaptive. Rickers, who runs it, is a fantastic guy who now is seated. He's in a wheelchair due to problems through his life. And this year he's decided, after 10 years of that he wanted to have a go to see if he could get involved in the Paralympics. So we started the process, and just before we went out to Worlds, a couple of weeks beforehand, we did a 4-hour session with athletes which came under the disability criteria for Paralympic under Cheer, because Cheer has been given Olympic assent but isn't fully in there at the moment. They hope to get it in for LA 2028, but it has multiple governing bodies and no one can agree the rules. So he set it up. He we videoed it all. We did interviews. He then presented it out to the International Cheer Union while we're out of Worlds. That went well, went really well. But because it'll be a GB team, it has to be in agreement with the three or four cheer unions. So England, Wales, and Scotland have to agree. So he's waiting to hear back from those before it can go to Paralympic Committee, and then it has to be reclassified for what disabilities we're allowed, because Paralympic is so complex. So I've gone from being a bit in despair of not being able to do stuff, trying to find something to do to rebuild my strength, to going out and training with some amazing people, learning, growing, and hopefully either go on to represent England in the next couple of years, or even better, to get the Paralympics. There's stuff that I would never have done. I've always been happy to support my daughters and be a cheer parent. It just gave me a whole different view on things once I stopped being able to do stuff and go out. And I did it to start off with just to see whether I could still do stuff. And then, like most people, got addicted. I was talking to Rick because we were on the same flight back before we came out. And he said to me, cheerleading isn't sport. It's a lifestyle. You live it. It takes over. It becomes everything. So it's given me a huge aim, chance to go on and build from it and do something positive and make people laugh, because there's me in sparkly sequins, which as an accountant, my day-to-day, you'd never think. And then, yeah, go out and do that. It's only 2.5 minutes. I think that's the other thing with cheer, which is quite nice, because things like my run-in's gone. Walking distance is harder now, because they're hard from a keep and going point of view for the fatigue, because fatigue is my worst symptom. 2.5 minutes for an adaptive routine, 2 for non-tumble because the tumble's out of it. It's go do it, and then you're off. That period of time's hard, but you can do it, and it's great, and it's been a massive thing to me. And now I've got to the point where I promote it is to try and get other people with MS to do it. I try with a lot of the MS charities to talk to them and get them to push sort of sport on a similar grounds to Ramon about what it's helped me do. I've just become a mentor for MS Shift, who are a charity in the UK based in Manchester. So going on to support other people with those and around early diagnosis and what it's like getting used to it and moving on. But that's kind of me and where I've been with it. I've had the highs, the lows, and everything else that's gone with it. I'm still adapting to it. I'm desperately stubborn to make sure that I keep pushing my body as much as I can. Sometimes regret it. There are times when it's the worst. For me, the hardest things are fatigue, and because of the Ocrevus that I'm on, which is an immunosuppressant, I can pick up illnesses, no problem at all, which is very frustrating. No one else around me can be ill and I'll pick something up. So that's kind of not me. So it's getting the balance with those, keeping the brain going, working full time. My MS team are fully behind it. My neurologist, the MS nurses, everybody thinks it's brilliant. They're just like, yeah, no, you've got to keep going. You're showing improvements at the moment. They won't last forever. I know that. I'm fully aware of what the illness is, and it will deteriorate over time. But anything I do now helps me into the future. So that's me as a bit. But I did do a little bit about this, and hopefully I've done the MS Societies. What is MS? So I'm hoping that works. If not, I will use YouTube again to bring it back up. But yeah, so MS, multiple sclerosis, is. Someone said to me that you come across somebody that seems to know, everybody seems to know someone with multiple sclerosis, but in reality, there's only roughly 150,000 in the UK out of nearly 70 million people with it. Multiple sclerosis is where your immune system decides that your nervous system is a virus, basically, and it just attacks it. So it constantly nibbles at it, which is where you end up with the lesions, because multiple sclerosis in Latin is multiple lesion. as I understand. I'm pretty sure that's what it is anyway. And so you're fighting your body whenever it's trying to protect itself. It's not. It's attacking you instead, causing problems. And depends where it hits. So all mine in my brain, so they're cognitive. I get those, hence me going slurred speech or blacking out, all that side of it. When it hits the spine, that can often be mobility. My understanding, one of the worst place to get is between the brain and spine where it connects. That little part there can cause all sorts of random things. But basically, it can hit any part of the nervous system, depending on what damage is there and how extensive it is. The most common form is relapse remitting, which about 90% of people are diagnosed with that to start off with, which is where you'll get a really nasty attack or a couple of attacks, and then you'll go for a period, possibly years, without anything happening, and then it happens again. The other form's the primary, which is what I've got, and where it's constantly there and slowly gets worse over time, or it can speed up in some forms. And secondary, which is where it goes from being relapse remitting into the more primary approach, where it slows down and stays a constant rather than hitting. And a lot more people are onto those. There's no cure. This is an incurable illness. Once you've got it, that's it for life. Stem cell has been tried, but it's never, you can't repair the damage to the myelin, which is the sheath that covers all your nerves. They're working hard to see if they can find medication to repair it, but as it stands, they can't. So once the damage is caused, it's there. There are a lot of treatments for those that are on relapse remitting. There's quite a few. They call it a menu when you get it to start off with, to all the different drugs and all the different side effects. Like I said, for me, it wasn't that simple. I could have Ocrevus or nothing. I mean, you do have the option not to take meds. I would always go for them personally. I think I've seen a lot of positives from being on the Ocrevus. It's made me a lot more stable. You said it is an immunosuppressant, so you do have to live with the fact that if anybody's ill around you, you're going to get it. Which is a little bit hard. I mean, Dr. Kosman said to me when he first went to look at do some modern treatments, he said the one thing to bear in mind is that life will never be the same once you start it, and there's no going back. Once that process has begun, you will be immunosuppressed. It is going to happen, but it'll help, and it has. So for me, I've seen positive with a few blips. I go every 6 months to have an infusion. Takes the morning. It's quite simple. I don't have the next day's pretty much a write-off. Your immune system's worse for about 2 weeks afterwards, so you've got to be extra careful, and then you're back to normal. It does start to wear off towards the end. Some people apparently call it the crap gap between the infusions. I had a big drop off this year. But as soon as I had my meds, I picked up really good. So that was okay. The medication side's been okay for me, but like I say, I've been lucky. Ocrevus doesn't have too many nasty side effects. Some of the others aren't particularly nice. No two people will ever be the same with MS, because it just attacks different parts of your nervous system. Depending on what it's attacked and what damage it's done, depends on what effect it's going to have on you. So each time something happens, you'll find another weird glitch. And like I said, in general, for me, I've found over the last 3-4 years, well, probably since 2020 when it started looking, that every day is a bit different. Something different can happen every day within the body. I can be there and all of a sudden my muscles of my arm will just start spasming for no reason, or even though my fingers a lot better since surgery, it'll just go and I can't control it, or my hands will cramp, or I'll lose all feeling in my face, which does happen quite a bit. Has its advantages, cheerleading, because when you get hit in the head, it doesn't hurt as much. Apparently, that's not as funny as I think it is. Other people wince when I say that. But yeah, it's kind of, it's a very unpredictable what it'll affect, and everybody's affected differently by it. It's very, very bizarre. So even though you chat to other people with MS, we all have slightly different. Fatigue is the most common issue across the whole of it, and that's because your body is working so much hard to compensate for where the damage is and work around it. yeah, when you're ill, it makes it a lot harder because your body's just overrunning all the time, it's just not great fun. Um, when you look at MS, certainly if you do research on the internet, you'll see a lot of people who are wheelchair bound. The reality is that that's actually a minority over to start with, certainly in the early periods. Like I say, it affects everybody different. Some people will end up that way, or younger, or others won't ever at all. But it is such a hidden disability that if you've got no visible tell with it, no one would ever know. So for the majority of the time, if I wasn't vocal about mine, people would not know, unless they see the spasms in my hands or my arms when it happens. You wouldn't have a clue chatting to me or seeing me or doing anything, or wandering around, unless I was having a stumbled day. And then I just probably look walking down the street, I probably just look like as if I'm drunk. And I've had that a few times when I've walked home from work, thinking everybody that's driving past obviously thinks I've been at the pub and I'm drunk when I'm not. So it's one of those ones that you really can't see, and it's hidden quite well. And the other one is MS is not fatal. I've been told by multiple people, both medical and non, that MS never kills anybody. It's all the things that can happen around afterwards. So it's the other illnesses you can pick up or the side effects. And certainly with my spinal issues, because I have spinal degeneration as well. So there's problems with the bottom of my spine as well as the top. They don't want to operate on the bottom, and it's functional at the moment. There's quite a bit of damage there. But when we were first looking at the scans, Dr. Cosman did say to me that these things, MS rarely comes on its own. So there's often other complications, and that's when it tends to be a bit more fatal for people. But life expectancy is only about 5 years less than anybody without it. So you can still live that full life. For me, I think it's probably the hardest part is getting over the beginning bit, getting over the shock of the fact that this is never going anywhere. And I still get days now where it hits me, this is it. It's staying. When you go through a few really bad days, you just think, well, how long can I do this? And I do question myself with the sports and that, how long I can go, how much time I have to do that. So, but I'm trying to pack in as much as I can in the earliest period, and it's like I say, it's an improved course period. Right. Here's another one of the videos, which for some reason isn't working. So I will actually, what I'll do is I'll pop the link to this into the chat, because unless I can get the sound working, it won't make sense with this one. So I will pop what is MS, and this is the MS Society's little animation. It's only 3 minutes long. In fact, I think it's less than that. It might be just over 2, but it's quite a nice sort of breakdown, which is far more professional than anything I would do, to give people an idea of what it really is. And actually, it's taken me a bit longer than I thought it would. For some reason, the slideshow stopped, but the next slide is Q&A. There you go. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Paul.
Hopefully all that made sense.
No, it did. It's been a fab presentation. It's been really interesting. I've learned a lot throughout it as well, and it's great to hear that you still keep an upbeat sense of humour and things, despite your diagnosis. I was going to ask one thing before I go. I think there's one that's just gone in the chat.
Yeah.
I know that you mentioned that you wake up each day and it can kind of be like a pick and mix of what happens or how you're going to be feeling. In terms of work, what reasonable adjustments have they put in place so you can make your day easier or things like that?
It's fairly flexible. So on the really rough days, I can just drop in and work from home. With the role that I've got, being a department head, it's a little bit more tricky. And I'm someone that prefers, I don't like being isolated on my own. I like being around people. So I've kind of pushed to be in more. I've got stuff like liftable desks and chairs, which are better for me to make it more comfortable and things like that. Bug season, this winter especially, I've had issues with, we've just moved into a big open planned office and a lot's gone round it. So I've ended up just we did a period where I said, look, this is probably going to be the worst for illness. It was when neurovirus and stuff was very high in hospitals. So we do have clinical staff, not many, but a few come in. So I agreed with our assistant director that I would work for about 4 or 6 weeks and I'd just do solid at home. And I think because I'm very open about my issues, I get that little bit more flexibility around it. So it's really kind of saying, look, okay, something's not working. My balance has gone completely, so I'm not going to come in, but I'll switch it for another day or I'll be in for another period. So it's been kind of give and take. And I think that's a lot around personality and a lot around the relationship I had with management anyway. I think for work, it was probably quite useful the fact that they went through this process with me. So they had a better understanding. And I mean, the other thing I've always had to tell people is don't judge other people with issues by how I act as well, because I do push to get in. I do like being in the office. I prefer to be around the people. I prefer to be involved. A lot of the stuff I do probably doesn't help me pushing too much, but the flexibility is the main thing I've got around the reasonable adjustments. I do have the voice software for if I need it. I've got other bits around those, so we did a full access to work and everything around it. But the thing that helps me the most is that flexibility of saying, okay, things aren't great today. I'm just going to drop in on from work home, and I'll end up doing more hours. I can't do. My team are very good. They will kick me off the computer if they see I'm working too much, because historically I've always done too many hours, too much, and long days, high stress, and that stress is horrendous for MS. It has awful effects. So they look after me a bit as well when I'm not particularly paying attention to my body. So there's kind of like this protection bubble.
Yeah, it sounds like you need someone to help
Yeah.
you with that.
It's quite unique, to be honest, and I think around the reasonable, I think flexibility is the best one for anybody with MS. Being able to say to someone, these bits aren't going to work very well in an office, or you're not going to get the best out of me there, or I can't speak properly, which does happen. I do have issues with speech at times where I can't talk properly, so I literally will just use Teams and do it all remotely. But as long as I'm upfront with them, they're pretty good. Yeah, and around that, it's just the usual sort of desks and bits. And I've got a roller ball, which our IT hate, but I like the roller mouse. It's much easier because I don't have to worry about. I'm left-handed, so like you say, I do everything the hardest way. I've got to have the rarest version. My left hand is where all my dexterity problems are. So I've got that, which is much easier than using a mouse, because if I use a mouse or I try and write for too long, my hand cramps out, and I can't physically move it. So yeah, there's little tweaks we've done. We just keep tweaking as we go on with it.
Nice. Thank you. I got a question in the chat from Claire.
Yeah.
How hereditary is MS?
It's not, thankfully, because that's one of the things, being a parent and certainly having a wife with a neurological issue, which again, thankfully, it's not hereditary. That was caused by an accident. You look to see if this is something that you can pass to your children, and they have no evidence at all that is hereditary. They don't fully understand what causes it. There's still a lot of research going around on that. There's a few things that have come out of US studies around people that have got MS that have been in the Navy, because apparently their records are excellent, that they're looking into. But as far as hereditary point of view, they don't think that there's any hereditary risk, which is good, because I'd never want to pass this to anybody.
Thank you. Matthew, you've got your hand up.
Yeah. Thanks, Paul. It's a really, really heartfelt and genuine story, and one that I can relate to as well, because I was diagnosed with relapsing remitting MS back in 2008.
Yeah.
So all of the things you kind of described about going through that, episodes of the unknown and what's wrong with me and all that kind of stuff, completely, I can relate to those 100%. Yeah, I mean, I've got a similar-ish story to, is it Roman?
Yeah.
the guy
Yeah.
you mentioned in the video. So I kind of turned sport once I was diagnosed, and I went down the triathlon route and all that kind of stuff, and I found that really sort of positive for me, because I wanted to do what you've done as far as taking a negative and turning that into a positive. So I tried to do lots of stuff that I wouldn't normally do. But unfortunately, like during COVID, I was hit with long COVID on the back of getting the virus. So my fatigue kind of elevated, and I wasn't able to do the kind of stuff that I used to be able to do. But yeah, I just wanted to say how brave I think you are coming forward with your story. I think it's great to hear, because obviously it's a hidden disability and people aren't aware of what's going on in regards to that. So I think it's really brave. I was diagnosed, like I say, many years ago, and I've only released kind of my story more recently at the Senior Finance Leaders Conference. And it's on the Skills Development Network, if you want to check that one out. But
Yeah, definitely.
yeah, no, I just wanted to say amazing story and well done.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Yeah, I
Matthew.
fully get the fatigue bit. I mean, when that hits, it makes it really hard to do anything. And to have that escalated by long COVID must be tough.
Thank you. Was there any other questions from anyone, either in the chat box or raise your hand? Dawn, would you like to come in?
Thank you. It wasn't a question, it was more just an observation. I've actually learned a huge amount around MS. I've clearly made a lot of assumptions over the years, and they've been incorrect. So thank you very much, Paul. I'm glad I've joined the call, because it's certainly changed my view. I did think that it was life limiting, and that once diagnosed, it was like you were living there waiting almost, and I wasn't aware that it impacted on speech and things like that. So it's been really eye-opening, and thank you, and I appreciate your honesty.
No, I like to share these things because, like you, Dawn, prior to diagnosis, even though I do know somebody with MS, I had no idea the impact and what it was like, and because a lot of what's out there in the media isn't particularly helpful in places. There are certain charities like MS Shift has some great stuff on it, which shows the different areas it can affect. That it's that sort of sharing and seeing what it can be like for each person. It's and finding the positives around it. But yeah, I'm glad people find it interesting, because when you tell your story, or you do something like this, and this is the first time I've tried to put it into writing, because I'll chat all day about it. It's kind of strange. You don't know how other people will find it.
Yeah.
Or whether your world's just completely bonkers. Because sometimes I think I'm mad. I mean, that is a reality of it.
Yeah.
Certainly
and
with
on
the
a
stuff I
lighter
now
note,
do.
what position do you take in your stunt group?
I am a base, back, or front. So for level 4 at the moment, I'm front end, because I've not been in the team very long, and we've only got a couple of sessions for me to learn a routine. For the adaptive team, it's my second year. I do a bit of everything. So I'm back in for our seated group to do those bits, because the girl who flies for it has issues with her back. She's got formal scoliosis, so we've got to be really careful when we drop her down. Make sure we capture her certain ways. So I back for Liv for that. I'm fronting in our pyramid part with a flyer I've worked with for 2 years. My youngest daughter is in the same team as me as a base, which is interesting because she's autistic. So when she has a moment, it's always again at me. But I do not fly. And as much as
my daughter's a back spot and a tumbler. Yeah. She's on. She's just come back from Worlds. She's on a level 6 Worlds team.
Yeah,
amazing sport. It needs to be in the Olympics.
It's got Olympic ascent. The national level 7 ran at Olympic rules this year.
Yeah, getting ready for it, aren't they?
They are getting ready for it. They've just got to get everybody to agree that score sheet, and it's confusing as anything. I mean, Worlds was confusing as much as it was. I mean, some of the raw scores have moved the way they did. Sorry, we've
Yeah.
ended up in a cheer conversation here.
Sorry, yeah, we'll
Blew
catch
my
up at some
mind.
point and have a good cheer conversation, Paul.
Definitely. Yeah, because like you say, it's life. We've done Summit, we've done Worlds, and apparently we're going back next year, so I've got to start saving again. But yeah, certainly for Paras back, I've been told that Rick wants me to back for that. Although a lot of the bits we did on our prep day, I also did support for a seated rider who's struggling. Third position is back, but I can also base. Although you've got to find someone that's nearly 6 foot to base with me.
My daughter's 5'10", so she'd be all right.
She'd be fine, yeah. My daughter, I can base with my daughter who's 5'3", and my eldest is only 5 foot. So they're not much good.
Thank you so much. Not only have I learned about MS, but I've learned about cheerleading too. Thanks again, Paul. If there's no
No
other
problem.
questions, I'll close the session. I'm right on time, really. Have a lovely afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Paul.
No problem at all. I've popped the link to What is MS from the MS Society in the chat as well, so that'll actually work. I have no idea why the videos didn't work, because they worked when I tried it earlier.
No, don't worry. Thank you,
Something
everyone.
has to go wrong, doesn't it? Thank you very much for coming, everybody.
Thanks,
you,
Paul.
Paul.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
organising the
Have a great
session.
afternoon.
Thanks.
See you
Thanks,
soon.
Natasha.
Bye.
Bye.